Pain, when it appears in your life, is not random noise. It is not merely an inconvenience to be silenced or an enemy to be defeated as quickly as possible. Pain is information. It is a signal that something matters deeply and that something is misaligned. Long before you can articulate what is wrong, before you can rationally explain your dissatisfaction or your anxiety, pain announces it with unmistakable clarity. It bypasses your intellect and speaks directly to your nervous system, forcing your attention onto the precise area you have been neglecting, avoiding, or misunderstanding. Think about how carefully designed pain is in the body. When you touch fire, you do not need a philosophical argument to understand that something is wrong. The pain teaches you instantly. It tells you where the boundary is, and it does so with authority. Psychological pain works in much the same way, though it is easier to lie about it. Emotional suffering, guilt, shame, anxiety, and grief are not merely weaknesses in your character or signs that you are broken. They are indicators that a value has been violated, a responsibility has been ignored, or a truth has been suppressed. Pain emerges precisely where meaning is under threat. What makes pain such a powerful teacher is that it cannot be ignored without consequence. You can pretend that everything is fine. You can smile, perform, distract yourself, and even succeed in superficial ways, but pain accumulates interest. The longer it is denied, the more complex and destructive it becomes. Small signals turn into chronic bitterness. Unspoken resentment hardens into cynicism. Avoided responsibility transforms into anxiety that seems to have no clear source. Pain teaches whether you want it to or not. The only real choice is whether you learn the lesson consciously or pay for it unconsciously. Pain also reveals hierarchy. It shows you what is truly important, not what you claim is important. You might say that honesty matters, but if lying creates unbearable tension inside you, pain exposes the contradiction. You might say that freedom matters, but if irresponsibility leads to chaos and despair, pain corrects your illusion. In this sense, pain is a ruthless auditor of your values. It strips away ideology and exposes reality. It asks one question again and again: what are you sacrificing, and is it worth the cost? There is a reason why people who have endured genuine suffering often possess a strange depth and clarity. Pain forces refinement. When life hurts badly enough, you are compelled to simplify. You no longer have the luxury of trivial concern. You begin to ask more precise questions. What am I doing wrong? What am I avoiding? What must be confronted now before it becomes unbearable? Pain sharpens attention, and attention, properly aimed, is the foundation of wisdom. But pain only teaches if it is interpreted correctly. If you treat pain as evidence that the world is unfair and that you are a victim of circumstances beyond your control, it will embitter you. It will shrink your capacity to act. On the other hand, if you treat pain as feedback, as a form of harsh but accurate guidance, it becomes instructive. It tells you where your model of the world is inaccurate. It reveals the gap between your intentions and your outcomes. It highlights the places where you must grow. This is why attempts to eliminate all pain from life are not only futile, but dangerous. A painless life would be a life without feedback, without correction, without depth. Imagine trying to learn anything meaningful without making mistakes that hurt. Imagine developing character without ever being tested. Pain is the cost of consciousness. It is the price you pay for being awake enough to notice when something has gone wrong. Pain also teaches humility. It reminds you that you are not omniscient, not omnipotent, and not exempt from the consequences of your actions. It collapses arrogance and exposes fragility. And yet, paradoxically, it is through this exposure that strength emerges. When you face pain honestly, you discover not only your limitations, but also your capacity to endure. You learn that you are stronger than you assumed, but only if you stop running. There is something profoundly human about pain's insistence on truth. It does not care about your self-image. It does not negotiate with your excuses. It simply states the facts: something is wrong, and it must be addressed. In that sense, pain is a moral force. It calls you back to alignment. It urges you to take responsibility, to speak what you have been withholding, to act where you have been passive, to change what you have been tolerating. When you understand pain as information, you stop asking how to get rid of it as quickly as possible, and you start asking what it is trying to teach you. That shift alone transforms suffering from a meaningless burden into a source of guidance. Pain becomes the dark messenger that leads you toward clarity, provided you have the courage to listen, the discipline to interpret, and the willingness to act on what it reveals. Growth does not begin with comfort. Comfort preserves what already exists. It maintains the status quo. Growth begins the moment you willingly step into something that disturbs you, unsettles you, and forces you to confront your own limitations. Pain is the gatekeeper to that territory. It stands at the boundary between who you are and who you could become, and it asks a single, brutal question. Will you face this voluntarily, or will you be dragged into it unwillingly later? Most people spend a significant portion of their lives trying to avoid pain. They delay difficult conversations, postpone responsibility, numb discomfort with distractions, and hope that unresolved problems will somehow resolve themselves. But avoided pain does not disappear, it mutates. It becomes anxiety without a clear cause, resentment without a clear target, and a vague sense of meaninglessness that poisons even moments of success. What was once manageable becomes overwhelming precisely because it was not confronted when it first appeared. Voluntary confrontation changes the nature of pain. When you choose to face what frightens you, the pain transforms from something chaotic into something structured. It becomes a challenge rather than a catastrophe. There is a profound psychological difference between pain that ambushes you and pain you willingly walk toward. In the first case, you experience yourself as weak and acted upon. In the second, you experience yourself as capable, even when the experience is difficult. The pain does not vanish, but your relationship to it changes, and that change is everything. Think about the discipline required to build strength, whether physical, mental, or moral. The process is inherently uncomfortable. Muscles grow only after strain and micro damage. Character develops only after failure, embarrassment, and correction. Wisdom emerges only after confusion and error. There is no shortcut around this. The pain is not a side effect of the process. It is the process. To reject the pain is to reject the growth it makes possible. When you voluntarily confront pain, you also reclaim agency. Instead of being at the mercy of circumstances, you become an active participant in your own development. You choose the burden you are willing to carry, and in doing so, you prevent the accumulation of heavier, more destructive burdens later. This is not about seeking suffering for its own sake. It is about choosing the meaningful struggle over the meaningless one. It is about accepting the discomfort that leads somewhere rather than enduring the stagnation that leads nowhere. There is also a deep ethical dimension to voluntary confrontation. Avoided pain does not remain private. When you refuse to face your own shortcomings, insecurities, and unresolved conflicts, they leak into your relationships. Unspoken resentment turns into passive aggression. Unacknowledged fear becomes control. Unfaced weakness becomes criticism of others. By confronting your pain, you reduce the unnecessary suffering you impose on the people around you. You become less dangerous, less reactive, and more trustworthy. Pain, when faced consciously, also clarifies priorities. It forces you to decide what is worth enduring discomfort for. Not all pain is equal, and not all pain is worth bearing. Voluntary confrontation requires discernment. You learn to distinguish between pain that signals destruction and pain that signals development. One erodes you, the other refines you. Learning the difference is one of the most important skills a person can acquire, and it can only be learned through experience. There is a peculiar courage that emerges when you stop running from pain. You begin to trust yourself more deeply. You learn that you can withstand difficulty without collapsing, without becoming bitter, without losing your sense of direction. This trust becomes the foundation of confidence, not the shallow confidence of bravado, but the quiet confidence of someone who knows they can endure reality as it is, not as they wish it to be. Voluntary confrontation also brings precision. When you finally face what you have been avoiding, vague dread turns into specific problems, and specific problems can be addressed. The unknown is always more terrifying than the known. Pain thrives in ambiguity. By naming it, examining it, and engaging with it directly, you reduce its power. What once felt overwhelming becomes finite, measurable, and negotiable. In choosing to confront pain, you accept a fundamental truth about life. That meaning is found not in the absence of suffering, but in the willingness to shoulder it responsibly. Life will demand a sacrifice from you regardless. The question is not whether you will suffer, but whether your suffering will be purposeful or wasted. Voluntary confrontation allows you to transform inevitable pain into a source of strength, clarity, and direction, shaping you into someone capable of meeting life without evasion or resentment. Endurance is not passive suffering. It is not about clenching your teeth and waiting for life to be over. True endurance is an active, conscious decision to remain engaged with reality even when reality becomes heavy, confusing, and painful. It is the refusal to let hardship reduce you into something small, bitter, or resentful. Pain will come regardless, but endurance determines whether that pain dissolves you into chaos or shapes you into someone capable of carrying meaning forward. When life collapses into disorder, when plans fail and expectations shatter, the instinctive response is to escape. People look for numbness, distraction, or ideology to shield themselves from the weight of what is happening. But chaos does not disappear when ignored. It expands. It spreads into every corner of life, contaminating relationships, perception, and judgment. Endurance is the act of standing in that chaos long enough to understand it, long enough to extract something useful from it, long enough to prevent it from consuming everything. Meaning is not discovered in moments of ease. In comfort, life feels pleasant, but it rarely feels significant. Meaning emerges when you are pushed to the edge of what you can tolerate and choose not to retreat. It is found in the decision to continue acting responsibly even when the reward is unclear and the cost is immediate. Endurance teaches you that meaning is not a feeling that arrives when circumstances are ideal. It is something constructed through sustained effort in the face of difficulty. Pain tests your internal structure. When everything is going well, flaws in character can remain hidden. Weak values, fragile discipline, and borrowed beliefs do not immediately collapse under light pressure, but pain applies weight. It reveals what is solid and what is merely decorative. Under suffering, what is unnecessary falls away, and what remains becomes essential. Endurance is what allows that refinement to occur without destroying you in the process. There is an ancient wisdom embedded in the idea that order must be carved out of chaos. Chaos is the unknown, the unpredictable, the territory where your assumptions no longer work. Pain often signals that you have entered that territory. Enduring pain means staying present long enough to learn its structure. It means observing what went wrong, how your actions contributed, and what must change to restore stability. In that sense, endurance is a creative act. You are not merely surviving, you are rebuilding. Endurance also disciplines emotion. Pain produces powerful feelings: fear, anger, despair, grief. If left unchecked, these emotions can dominate perception and distort judgment. Endurance does not mean suppressing emotion, but it does mean refusing to be ruled by it. It is the capacity to feel deeply without acting blindly. Through endurance, emotion becomes information rather than command, allowing wisdom to emerge instead of impulsive reaction. There is something deeply meaningful about carrying a burden well. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly and consistently. When you endure pain with integrity, you become reliable, first to yourself and then to others. People begin to trust you not because you are perfect, but because you are stable under pressure. That trust is not abstract, it has real consequences. It creates families that feel safe, workplaces that function, and communities that do not collapse at the first sign of adversity. Endurance also protects you from nihilism. When suffering is interpreted as pointless, life begins to feel empty and cruel. But when suffering is endured with the aim of preserving what is good, protecting what is valuable, and becoming someone more capable, it acquires meaning. The pain does not vanish, but it is no longer arbitrary. It becomes part of a larger narrative, one in which you are not merely a victim of circumstance, but a participant in your own becoming. Pain often demands sacrifice. Something must be given up, an illusion, a habit, a relationship, an identity that no longer fits. Endurance allows you to make that sacrifice consciously rather than having it ripped away in chaos. There is dignity in choosing what you will let go of. There is strength in deciding what you will preserve at all costs. Meaning emerges at that intersection between loss and commitment. Enduring pain also deepens compassion. Those who have suffered and endured understand vulnerability in others. They recognize fear not as weakness, but as a universal human condition. This understanding does not make them permissive, it makes them precise. They know when to be firm and when to be patient. Their empathy is grounded in reality, not sentimentality, because it has been earned through experience. Over time, endurance reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who needs life to be easy in order to function. You begin to see yourself as someone who can remain upright even when life is difficult. This shift is subtle but profound. It changes how you approach the future. You no longer demand certainty before acting. You act responsibly despite uncertainty. That is where real confidence is born. Pain will visit everyone, that is unavoidable, but meaning is optional. It is something forged through endurance, through the refusal to let suffering have the final word. When you endure consciously, pain becomes more than an affliction. It becomes the raw material from which strength, wisdom, and order are built, moment by moment, choice by choice, in the face of a world that will never be entirely predictable or gentle.